Hello again, everybody. My name is Preston. I'm going to be doing day 2 of our Bible study in Matthew. This is Matthew chapter 2. Um, I have a few points that I'd like to talk to you about in this chapter, but first I just kind of want to walk you through the chapter and give you somewhat of an overview of it. So the chapter begins with the wise men who are going out because they see the sign that was prophesied of a star in the sky that's leading them to where the birthplace of the Messiah is. And so they see this star and they're like, "Oh my gosh," they're rejoicing out of their mind, and they're coming to Jerusalem and they're asking people, "Where's Jesus? We saw the star. We saw the sign. Where's Jesus?" And it even says, "Where is he who has been born the King of the Jews?" Or where is he who has been born King of the Jews? And so that keyword is important because the king of Judea at the time is King Herod, and Herod hears of that, and Herod's a little bit sly. He's not the greatest guy. He is probably feeling some sort of intimidation over the fact that Jesus is to be king over the Jews, or this Messiah is king over the Jews, and he doesn't want his own position to be overthrown. But he's playing it a little sly right now. He starts calling together his chief priests and scribes and Pharisees and the people who would know, and he inquires about them where the Christ is to be born. And they come back with the answer of Bethlehem. And they even give him the prophecy in Bethlehem of Judea, for so it is written by the prophet, and it talks about it. "And you, O Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for from you shall come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel." That's one of the key points that I wanted to talk about, is the prophet. There's so many prophecies that end up getting fulfilled inside this chapter. It's an important talking point for sure. But moving on, Herod summons the wise men secretly, it even says, and ascertained from them what time the star had appeared, and he wanted to send them to Bethlehem, saying, you know, "Go find where this child is, and when you find him, come back and tell me so that I can come and worship him as well with you." Being very sly. It didn't seem like he had any intention of worshiping Jesus. But they didn't necessarily realize that, it seems like. They just received an order from the king, and if you receive an order from the king, you better do it. So they went out and they looked for Jesus, and they are following the star, and they find the star resting on a house or a building of some kind. They go in and they're rejoicing out of their mind, because now they're not just seeing the star, they're seeing the Christ, the Messiah born, and they're giving offerings of frankincense and myrrh and gold, and they're so overjoyed. Then something else interesting happens. They're warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, not to go back and complete their assignment. They're warned, and they take this warning seriously. And this is interesting because it doesn't specifically say that the dream warned them and told them the reason why they are not to go back to Herod. It just said it warned them not to go back to Herod. And they listened, and they departed to go back toward their own land. That's interesting for me as a side point of the importance of blind faith, and we don't always get great reasons why God wants us to do something, but if we're blessed enough to get a clear warning from God, then we need to follow it either way. But then going on, it says, when they had departed, when they had listened to this dream, that's the warning, and the wise men departed to go into their own country, Joseph gets a dream. Joseph gets a dream too. And this is instruction as well. It says, and warning as well. It's basically, you need to depart. You need to go to Egypt. And this time there is a reason given. Let me find it. For Herod is about to search for the child and destroy him. They're like, you need to go to Egypt because Herod's going to try and kill this child, this Messiah, this Christ. But the interesting thing is, well, of course, Joseph listens to this dream. He's blessed enough to both get the instruction and the reason for the instruction. And he's like, we got to go. And the instruction is, we're going to go to Egypt, and you're going to sit there until I come back and talk to you. The angel is like, an angel appears to him in a dream, the angel of the Lord appears to him in a dream and says, "Go to the land of Egypt and remain there until I tell you. Go sit there and wait for me to come back and give you new instruction." And so Joseph takes Mary and Jesus and goes to Egypt and remains there until the death of Herod. Not that they knew necessarily that Herod was dead, but they remained there until the death of Herod. And the cool thing is, this is another prophecy being fulfilled. This was to fulfill what the Lord had spoken by the prophet. "Out of Egypt I called my son." I want you to keep note of that too. If I can remember, I'm going to try and roll back to these prophecies. "Out of Egypt I called my son." Then Herod, when he saw that he had been tricked by the wise men, became furious. So here's Herod. He's trying to be all sly. He's like, "Oh, great, the Messiah, the Christ is born to us. Yeah, well, go over there and find him. And when you find him, come back, tell me so that I can come worship him too." But when they didn't do what he said, they disobeyed him via the warning of God, Herod is furious. And what does he do? He orders that for all of Judea, or all of this land, he's going to have his people murder every male child 2 years and under. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine being so overcome by selfish ambition, by greed, by lust for power, and by furious anger, that at the face of not just somebody taking over your throne, but Christ, the Messiah of God, the Son of God, taking over your throne, your response is to try and murder him before he can. And when your attempt doesn't work, you murder everybody in the land so that you, in theory, will kill him as well. That's a hard one to imagine. And there's the saying that absolute power corrupts absolutely. And I think there's probably truth to that in many cases, especially if the one in power is not governed by Jesus, by God, the higher power. But in so doing, he fulfilled yet another prophecy. And this was the prophecy that was inside Jeremiah. "A voice was heard in Ramah, weeping and loud lamentation, Rachel weeping for her children. She refused to be comforted because they are no more." Not because they're not comforted, because they are no more. And I believe Rachel is being used as the symbolic way of describing all the mothers in this land at this time who have all their male children murdered and taken away from them. How many families couldn't continue on their name because their only male child was killed? How many families had to endure the misery of not being able to continue their family's name and just being wiped off the face of the earth through history in that way? And more than that, how many people just had to endure the misery of losing their loved child? And this isn't even like in today's time where a lot of people don't want children. This is back in the day when children are just prized so highly and hugely valuable. I don't think I'm not qualified to be able to understand the misery that they were going through with that. But I can imagine that it was feeling unbearable. But continuing on, we have another dream. When Herod died, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in Egypt and told him to come back to the land of Israel because those who sought the child's life are dead. And so Joseph's like, all right. So he starts coming back to Israel. He comes to the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus, pardon me if I'm mispronouncing it, was reigning over Judea in place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there. And he gets a warning in another dream to withdraw. And so he withdrew to the district of Galilee. So it's like things changed. That could be confusing for Joseph, but he keeps trusting in the warnings that he's getting from these dreams. And he went and lived in a city called Nazareth, which is a fulfillment of another prophecy, yet again. Nazareth, so that what was spoken by the prophet might be fulfilled, that he would be called a Nazarene, spoken by the prophets, plural. So that brings us through the chapter. What I wanted to talk about, the talking points, is the importance of blind faith, which we're just kind of touching on, of these wise men who are blindly going, and they didn't necessarily even have a reason why they're to disobey the king. They could be killed for that. You know, kings are pretty temperamental, especially when they're not governed by God, and here they're disobeying the king's order and going back to their own land earlier in the chapter. King might kill them for that, might kill their families for that. They don't know. They're taking a risk, but they're warned in the dream, and they follow the warning by blind faith, in terms of not knowing why, but knowing the warning. They blind faith follow the warning. And Joseph, he's blessed to know the reasons why, but that's still going to be difficult. It's still going to be difficult to uproot your life and just go and sit there until you get another warning. It's still hard, but he still chooses to go. And so faith, whether it's blind or knowledgeable, is so important for us. And so I wanted to, kind of talk about that in a sense where, if you or me are ever in a scenario where we're blessed enough to receive a warning, whether we know the why or not, I want to encourage both of us to go and follow that warning. And so also there's this thing about prophecy. One is kind of what I touched on yesterday, of prophecy being so intensely valuable for those of us who are low in our faith, or are more pragmatic, more practical minded, more pessimistic, whether we're agnostic or atheistic, whoever's watching my video. I myself have been at a point in my life where I was agnostic for quite some time, and arguably atheistic for a little bit of time as well. But one of the things that helped me grow my faith is prophecy. Some of these prophecies in the Bible are ridiculous. How can you make a prophecy of like 800 years before and it gets fulfilled perfectly? How do you explain that? You can find explanations, but you have to be intellectually honest with yourself. You can find the explanation, but you need to be honest with yourself. It could be coincidence, but is that more likely or less likely than the thought process of this prophecy actually had value and worked? For me, I find it far more intellectually honest to actually believe that the prophecy was real. Let's see, what else? Oh, there's an aspect of the apparent contradictions in the Bible that can come up. That's something that I struggled with a lot whenever I was agnostic. One such contradiction that could be coming up prior to Jesus fulfilling these prophecies is the people of the time could have been looking at the Bible saying, well, wait a minute, what is this? The Messiah is going to be born in Bethlehem, and then he's going to be born, or he's going to be from Nazarene, he's going to be from Egypt, and he's from Judah. What is all this contradiction? He's going to be born in one place. Where is he always from? All this stuff. That would be a apparent contradiction that, if I was alive in that time, would have probably potentially bothered me about it. But here in the fulfillment of the prophecy, you see exactly what happens. He was born in Bethlehem, like it said, and yet he was living in these other locations, and therefore was called from these locations. So that's a really simple version of a contradiction. That's a pseudo contradiction. It's not real. What I found in my own experience in life, especially when I was going through agnosticism and atheism, was all the apparent contradictions that I saw in the Bible when I studied it. I saw a contradiction. I intellectually felt convicted to study this until I felt that I couldn't find any other explanation. And every time I did that, I found that it was not that the Bible was contradicting itself or contradictory. It was my interpretation was incorrect because of a lack of perspective. And that's what we see here. The contradiction that I could find there, the pseudo-contradiction, is not a real contradiction. It's my own lack of perspective until I see the actual happenings that took place in Jesus' early life here. And then finally, just the danger of greed is the last point I wanted to talk about. And I don't know what to say other than we should guard our hearts against this. We should guard our hearts against the danger of selfish ambition, narcissistic greed that cares about no one else but your own self and your own needs in your own present moment, and that is more important than anything to you, and that this, like Herod, his kingdom was the most important thing in his life, and nothing else seemed to matter, not even the murder of his people's sons. Sadly, Herod's not the only person in power that has committed genocide or committed mass murder of children on a huge scale, or even just mass murder of their own people. He's nowhere near the only person, but it's such a sad state of affairs. And I don't know, maybe it's a segue into we need to be praying for our leaders in power. And that's something that for me personally feels hard to think that my prayers do something in that sense. But the effective fervent prayer of a righteous man avails much. Something like that. God hears all of our prayers, and in his timing he can either answer them or not, depending on what his will is for our life. But our prayers mean something. Our prayers can change God's plans, can change God's purpose in his heart. And we see that in the Old Testament when those who are over the children of Israel are praying to God on behalf of them, and he changes his punishments for them because of the prayer of those that were seeking to intercede on their behalf. Now, that leads me into the segue of just being thankful for our intercessor now, which is Christ, interceding on our behalf. I don't know how to end this. I'd just like to end this by encouraging us to try so hard to be in tune with the Spirit of God guiding us, whether that be in dreams or in feelings and notions and happenings in our life. However God speaks to you and however God speaks to me, I want us to be as in tune and as responsive to that call as possible. And I want us to guard against the selfish ambition and all of those things I mentioned, especially as it relates to our current position here on the earth. Because this life is fleeting. This life is temporary. What does it matter that he has his kingdom for another few years before he dies? But what does it matter that he could change and serve the Christ that has actually come to the world? And then also just encourage you, especially if you are a person who struggles with a lot of doubt and lacking in faith, to do as much due diligence and do as much honest intellectual criticism of yourself and of your own interpretation of the Bible as you would pose onto the Bible to believe in it. Because from my experience, like I said, all the times, every time that I have found a contradiction that I saw in the Bible, it was not that the Bible was contradicting itself. It was that my interpretation was incorrect based on my perspective. And that happened over and over and over and over and over and over again, so many times that it got to the point where now, when I do find a contradiction in the Bible, I no longer think that it's going to be a real contradiction, but I patiently wait and seek it out until I can find where my perspective was wrong, because now I automatically assume that's what's going to happen because it's been so repetitive in that way. Thank you for watching. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed this content, and pray that God blesses you. I'm going to go ahead and do a prayer on my shorts on this channel as well, so if you'd like to check that out, or if you need prayer, check in. Thank you for watching.